Great way to start off. So welcome. Just a little chuckle and a little, getting back into the groove of things. So thank you so much for coming today. My name is Christina Furtado, and I'm the Mental Health and Wellness Specialist with guard.meCARES. And today's conversation is about strength in numbers, the importance of community on mental health. Now, while we meet today on this virtual platform, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands in which we all call home. At which time I'd love to welcome Landry to the screen and our panelists. Thank you. Truly grateful that you all have come to join us. Al, I would love it if you would start us off today.
Welcome, everybody. I'm just going to, with everybody's permission, start us off with a smudge. We'll get some good juju going, some good air, and some good energy. So bear with me for a moment. So every morning you get up and I thank my creator and my ancestors for this day. The fact that I did get up in the morning, and we have so much to be thankful for. So I asked my creator and my ancestors to be with us today and to send our message, give our message strength, distance, and to be effective with all who are in attendance today. So with everybody's permission, I smudge everyone. Virtual platform, those of you in attendance are panelists, my good friend Christina, and so this thing bears fruit and provides service for everyone involved. Miigwech. Anin, bonjour, Wache, and hello. Jinikas, Al Landry. My family is from Doki's First Nation. My spirit name is Grey Owl, and I am from the Eagle Clan. And the main reason I am here today is because my mother was a residential school survivor. I've also been entrusted with the duties and responsibilities of being the Addictions Mental Health and Addictions Navigator at the North Bay Indigenous Friendship Center. Inspired by the 94 recommendations, calls to action contained in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, this land acknowledgement is a necessary step towards honoring the original occupants on this land, the Indigenous peoples. North Bay, the land on which I speak to you on today, is a traditional territory of the Nipissing First Nation Anishinaabe, and this territory is also covered by the Robinson-Huron and the Upper Canada Treaties, 1850. For millennia, our First Peoples lived in such a way to keep balance, taking only what we needed, using all that we did, and respecting and giving thanks to our Mother Earth as she has provided everything we've needed thus far and will continue to do so. Therefore, I wish to acknowledge and recognize the traditional First Nations, Métis, and Inuit as keepers of this territory, also known as Turtle Island. Now, at this time, I also wish to acknowledge those who were affected by colonialism in the forms of residential schools, Indian day schools, the 60s scoop, and other forms of colonialism, including but not limited to murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls, and the 2S LGBTQ plus communities. So to all the panelists, to those in attendance, and to my very special colleague, mentor, and best friend, Christina, miigwech, and welcome.
Miigwech, thank you so very much, Al, for doing that. I think it's an important practice and a reminder to us all that we all have a responsibility and a duty to create change moving forward. And that also sort of highlights what today's conversation is about. Each of our panelists, while from various experiences and backgrounds and even career choices, all have something in common. And it's that link, that desire to be agents of change within their communities. Al, as he mentioned, is the addictions and mental health navigator at North Bay Indigenous Friendship Center. Al has spent much of his career helping others become better versions of themselves, including myself. Within Al's role, his primary goal is to help improve Indigenous health outcomes and reduce family violence in Indigenous families. As a mental health and addictions navigator, Al supports the creation of effective links between traditional and mainstream programs and services for individuals within the Indigenous community. So we welcome Al Miigwech.
Oh,
Asante Hontano. Oh, I know I chopped that last name up, but I'm sure he'll correct me. Now, Asante is a mental health advocate devoted to changing the world. He's focused on amplifying the stories of everyday people to illuminate gaps in the system while working to build bridges between community members and policymakers in order to find solutions to challenges together. Asante is the co-founder of the Reach Out Response Network, a TEDx speaker, and a CAMH difference maker, awarded with the distinction of being one of the top 150 mental health influencers in Canada. When Asante's not speaking and advocating, he is designing, managing, and facilitating peer support training programs at Stella's Place. So welcome, Asante, again. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And Kendall Jamal Doucette, a wonderful colleague of mine, is the mental health and wellness consultant with guard.meCARES and the Wellness and Learning Initiatives program. As a graduate of Centennial College and Brock University Recreation and Leisure Studies program, Kendall brings an appreciation not only for the therapeutic impact, but the importance of engagement, and really looks for the opportunities to find and engage others in his missions. Kendall proudly and openly positions himself within the collective BIPOC and 2S LGBTQIA+ community. As Kendall continues to look for and create opportunities to further his own healing, learning, and education through his current training as a psychodynamic psychotherapist, he inspires and is inspired and dedicated to leverage his education, privilege, social location, lived and professional experience to help support highlighting the need for really equity, advocacy, inclusion, and collective consciousness. It is about amplifying the voices. It is about creating change. And all of us today are agents of change. And we're hoping that our conversations plant seeds within each of you as to how and why we each have a role to play within the change that we want to see. We talk about community very loosely in a lot of different conversations. And each various group has their own sense of community. You've got a community within your personal life, within your professional life, and even within the sphere of your influence without you even realizing. And while each of us interact with these various communities, we find ourselves collectively across the world, without even directly knowing each other, that we each find ourselves in a stage of healing, in a stage of recovery. After years of disruption, we must take the time to piece ourselves back together. Now, it is an individual's journey to wellness, which is unique. It is about transformative and intentional commitment. But when it comes to community and its impact on our mental health, we need to also take a step back and appreciate that connection to community, the importance of building relationships within the social networks that provide us support. So today, we are here to talk about community, the importance of raising the collective consciousness to move forward and to take action towards shaping and strengthening each other. So I'd like to start by sort of posing the question, and Kendall, I'm going to ask you first. Mm-hmm. Why is community so important to mental health?
You know, when I when I think about community, I think about it has the ability to play an anchor. So in the sense of I'm able to go out and live into the world and experience, what can be sometimes a harsh reality. Um, and then I also have the ability to step back and be a part of a collective where I can be supported, I can be replenished, I can recharge. Um, so I think community it informs the health of the individual, and I think it's a cyclical relationship. So a healthy individual will also inform a healthy community. So it really feeds into one another.
Thank
Hmm.
you.
Yeah.
Asante, what do you think?
For muting up.
There we go.
All right, cool. There we go. My computer's lagging a little bit. It does that whenever I'm on StreamYard. So
It's
anyway,
okay.
I, I think the thing for me, with respect to community, I echo a lot of what you said, Kendall. Of course, I think mental health is not possible without community. And I don't just mean community in the sense of the way that we talk about it when we're at work. I mean the real deal form of community. Isolation is, I mean, isolation and poor mental health go hand in hand. Humans are social beings. Humans are folks who need each other to get things done, but also for emotional support to bounce ideas off of, to feel safe. So for me, there is no mental health without community. I just think that you can't take the two away or separate the two, I should say.
I do agree, and again, you bring up a valuable point. And we sort of touched upon it with regards to the introduction. Is even the definition of community is so widespread, right? And that can contribute to some of the barriers, I guess, that can exist within various groups, because their sense of community may not necessarily mean or look the same as another. So I think for the purpose, again, of reorienting the individuals that are with us today to various understandings of what community and how community could be defined. I know this is a question that we didn't necessarily prepare for, but I'd love to hear your perspective of how you would define community. So Al, how would you define community?
Community is just basically, to me, a collection of people. I mean, everything that we do, especially as a society, pretty much involves people to one degree or another. A community it can be anything from your local neighborhood, people down the street, people at work, and the people in the field in which we work. And I find that one bears more fruit when it comes to dealing with mental health, addictions, and as it's been mentioned, that need to isolate. A lot of people do that, me included. With willfully. I like to isolate. I like my alone time, and after dealing with what I deal with during the course of any given day, I need to disconnect, and I need to detach, and I need to decompress, and I can't do that sometimes on my own. As you know, Christina, you and I have had a couple of talks over the last few years since we've served together, and you're a big part of that community to me. Always have been. Hopefully, always will be. I see no reason to think otherwise. But community is anything that I think that binds together to benefit everyone. Everyone in that community and potentially others as well. The collective, obviously, strength in numbers type thinking, can work for or against you. But in the meantime, for the most part, community forward thinking has to be healthy.
Wonderful. Thank you. Kendall, and what about yourself? The definition of community for you?
Yeah, like what Al and Asante were speaking to, the idea of us as social and relational beings where we need people to grow, to develop, to learn from. I was thinking about even the title "Strength in Numbers." I think that when I think of community, it's not necessarily about the numbers, but the quality. And so that is something that I'm aware of now in my life. And I think as I've gotten older and my social circle has kind of gotten smaller, it's about quality now and about quality relationships and looking at my different intersections, so the different identities that I assume, and trying to find either community within those niches or just as a large.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Asante, anything to add to that? What your definition of community would be?
I think the first word that comes to mind is togetherness. And I think that's not just a physical togetherness. It's a mutual understanding of experience, right? And in a world that is quickly diversifying, I think that can be challenging at times for us as humans. But at the same time, I feel like within that, how we overcome those challenges is, are we listening to each other? Are we hearing each other's stories? Are we honoring the different identities that folks bring with them into the world? And, I think when we do that, then we do a much better job of fostering togetherness. And again, just the more we can have that sense of community, I think the better our individual and collective mental health becomes.
Yeah, thank you. And you brought something up with regards to shared experiences. And while I appreciate, that being a vital factor, a significant factor within various communities, I look at, a sense of community as being that in which you can show up within that environment of people as your true authentic self. And that group of people that is within the sphere of your direct influence welcome you to do that, understand you to do that, and is non-judgmental to give you the space to do that. And I sort of have taken that perspective on in order to broaden, in essence, my support network. So when I've sort of hijacked that thought process of staying within a community that has my same lived experience, while that adds value to my life and my healing and my recovery of those experiences, I also need to be open to, coordinating and collaborating and welcoming other individuals to broaden my community. Because I think that's also something that each of us have, that we have an ability to build our own communities, to then be able to, unite, educate, and create change from that strength. And that's sort of where I think the title came, is that, we are all agents of change, and we can all be dominoes of change. And it does take one person to sort of make those dominoes fall in order to see and gain traction for what it is we want to achieve. But change cannot just happen with one domino. And when we talk about mental health, as it relates to community, I think something else that we need to appreciate as part of that more collective consciousness as it relates to community is that not all mental health resources are accessible. Not all attitudes about mental health are necessarily the same. And we know that, yes, we've done a lot of work, and a lot of work needs to still be done in order to improve those access, to lessen the stigma that still sort of is housed within that umbrella of mental health and well-being. So while we talked about the definition of community, again, all starting points, building blocks to our own education, so we can really gain a bit of perspective and critical reflection as to how we want to position our own individual roles within changing our communities. How is mental health important as an issue within your communities? Now, again, we've all have various backgrounds and experiences, as Asante says, that gives us our stories, gives us our narratives, and contributes to the identities that we carry. So how does mental health fit into that?
Yeah, I'll jump in.
Hmm.
I think for me, the probably the part of my identity that resonates greatest for me is, being black and being Jamaican. Um, and mental health is a challenge for us, for a variety of different reasons. But the biggest one being discrimination and racism. Um, and I don't think that the magnitude of the impact of discrimination and racism on folks like me who experience it is really understood, because the magnitude is the things that have been most traumatic in my life, and I have a life filled with trauma. If anyone knows what ACEs are, my ACEs score is pretty high. um, the things that have been most traumatic to me in my life are racism and poverty. And well, the poverty exists in large part because of the racism. um, so for me, it's walking around in the world every day not knowing if I'll be safe is it's it's like this is what I have to protect against with respect to my mental health on a daily basis, right? This is just one of the many things, right? And so it's an added layer for folks who look like me, and I'm sure folks from other identities have added layers for them too. So I don't want to, you know, diminish anyone else's experience, but just speaking for myself, it's being black has, and the way in which I'm treated because I'm black certainly has had a mental health impact on me, and it's something that I see in the community all the time. And I'm not even sure that within black communities we understand the extent to which racism is impacting us, impacting our lives,
Mhm.
impacting our outcomes, and how those things contribute to poor mental health. So I think it's just, I don't know. For me, it's just we need to make we just need to understand what's going on a little bit better, a lot better.
A lot better. Yeah. Thank you. Because I think that, again, what we do know, is through education and through awareness and adopting a non-judgmental stance and supportive stance really makes a difference. And it's also hearing the stories of those that have experienced certain life experiences and certain traumas and certain situations that have really challenged and contributed to their poor mental health, and even just challenging life experiences in general. We need to hear the stories to educate us so we do become aware. And it's discussions like this where it is the platform, it is the opportunity to share those experiences and really highlight that our experiences contribute to who we are. And if we are not well, that becomes who we are in our interactions. So, Kendall, what about you? The importance of mental health as an issue within the community.
Um, I love what Asante spoke to there, and also what you just said, Chris, around amplifying the voices so we can hear the stories, but it's also about hearing the stories from the people's mouths who are actually the ones that are experiencing the stories. So I think about my own intersections, moving through the world in spaces where I felt like I had to diminish my blackness or I had to diminish my sexual orientation. Um, so it's something that really impacts me still to this day. And I love what you talked about there, Asante, about safety and having to be out in the world and not necessarily knowing who you're interacting with, what their experience is of, or the story that's attached to who they're seeing in front of them, sometimes in discriminatory ways. So, um, my communities that I identify with, there's a really large impact on our wellness, um, our self perception. So what we internalize about ourselves in our worth. So these really impact us, and it's again like you're saying too about just moving through the world is already a challenge, and then you throw these layers on that you're kind of putting on your backpack. And you're like, all right, this is what I'm working with. So, yeah, it's a big challenge, but I think it's like we're doing today. We're creating collective consciousness. We're amplifying each other's voices so that people can see that this is something that we have to address.
Thank you. Yeah. And something else to point out, this week is also Men's Health Week. And it again speaks to some of the difficult conversations. While we identify that mental health can be a very hard conversation for any demographic and frankly, any culture to actually have. We have to be vulnerable to have that conversation as to our own mental states or even to share our experiences without fear of judgment, not only from self, but from those that we're sharing our story with. So I see how, again, with various intersects and various identities, mental health has its own role to play. And while today, again, we're talking about larger communities and its impact on mental health, we cannot ignore the vital, critical aspect that even smaller communities of groups that identify with each other, it's the same. We need to highlight the importance of honest, upfront conversations about how we're doing and allow others to do that without judgment. Al, what about you? You're muted.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
In my mind, there's no question that community is important. And it's, the mental health is a reflection of the community, I think, in many instances. And sometimes the community is a reflection of the mental health population, those that are find themselves with everyday challenges, things like getting out of bed, hygiene, going to work, things like that most people might take for granted, and that I can just get up and go to work. When we don't know why some people don't know why depression can be debilitating, anxiety can be debilitating. PTSD is a big up and comer lately. I've seen a couple of documentaries with regards to new avenues of treatment with magic mushrooms and other hallucinogens. So we have come a long way, but still at the grassroots level. There's for instance, here in North Bay, I convene twice weekly with representatives from local agencies. And these are CMHA, they are the recovery home, the hospital, mobile crisis with our police units. And what we do basically is if somebody hears of something or they get a tip, if you will, or some information directing us to an individual or a family in need for a number of reasons, most often it's mental health and something behavioral, we will select of the, I'm going to say 20 or 25 agencies we've got here in town, select the most appropriate and suitable agencies to convene at a different level. They'll discuss things at I think we call it level 4, but eventually we intervene. There's an intervention that takes place. We approach the individual or the family, and we explain to them, this is what we've come into, this is the knowledge we've come into, the information we've come into. This is why we're here. We're here to help. No, we can smell marijuana in the back. That doesn't matter to us. What we want to do is just offer help, connect people to services and supports. So that's what we'll do. And myself and the Friendship Center, we've been on a few and over the last couple of years. And it's incredible to me anyways, because this was a new endeavor for me to find out how many people don't know about us. So we're kind of like a specialty task force, if you will, people that can't or won't reach out for a myriad of reasons. Sometimes it's anxiety, and as simplistic as that sounds, again, it can be debilitating for a lot of people. So we'll approach these individuals and we'll offer them services and supports, and essentially we'll leave them either connected, informed, or they don't want to have anything to do with us because that's what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Right? And even as Christine knows as well as I that mental health and addiction go hand in hand. But we're also, like I said earlier, we're also finding that PTSD and other instances come into play. And along the lines of somebody complaining that they have fibromyalgia when it's not visually evident. And, people will always have that cynical approach to it. And I don't know why. I mean, one of the best things I saw in the last few decades was Clara Hughes stepping forward and saying, you know what, me too. And those two words can be the most important thing somebody hears in their day. And that inclusion can open a door that, could mean just a lifetime of recovery, eventually getting to the point where they might even be, happy with themselves, happy with others, happy and be able to relate to the world around them. It is imperative that community is important. Because without a healthy community, it's hard for people to put their hand up and say, hey, I need some help here. Sometimes they gauge the community based on, hearsay or third-party information. And without delving into it, they might come to a conclusion which is ill-informed or underinformed. When then we'll come up with the gateway, what do you call it? The community mobilization. Our Gateway Hub mobilization table. And we'll bring it to them and we'll say, hey, here we are. We've been here all along. Do you want a little piece of this sort of thing, right? And people are actually quite amazed that we even exist.
I think it brings up a good point, Al. And it's something that we've sort of utilized in a lot of different discussions around mental health, around anti-racism discussions. And that is, you don't know what you don't know. Right. And when we come in with assumptions that we know, or we don't even come in with the position or the mindset of curiosity to find out, that can contribute not only to that sense of community, but also to that individual's feeling or place of belonging within that community. And it was mentioned throughout various sharings so far, is that sense of belonging. And, that contributes to our mental state and how we feel. And it really, for me, highlights that link of how mental health is influenced by communities. So, Asante, and I know you've touched upon this already. So if there's anything else you can add to it as to how you feel or what your opinion is with regards to how one's mental health is influenced by communities, whether it be the ones that you identify with or just even as an observer of other communities.
Yeah, so I work on something called the Community Healing Project, and it's an initiative here in the city of Toronto. And the entire point is to reach out to young people who come from neighborhoods where there's a lot of community violence, and to support those young people through that experience before they end up in a situation where maybe they're involved in violence themselves. So, and one of the things that might be assumed for these young people in the community is that they have community there, because a lot of these communities, they are very, despite the fact that there is violence there, if you've been in one of these communities, there's a lot of it's hard to describe it, but there's this feeling of everyone's together, right? But then, you reach out to these specific folks who have been impacted by trauma in a specific way. And what we do is we create community with them. And one of the things that I've discovered is that a lot of them don't feel like they necessarily belong in their community because of their experiences, right? So it goes beyond just, the superficial level. It's what have we experienced. And I think when we start to focus on that, it becomes easier to create communities across, kind of across the boundaries of the superficial ways in which we categorize ourselves. So, it's interesting. I've been doing this work so long, and I think people are always like, Santi's talking about race all the time, and I am. But when I talk about stories, what I'm really talking about is experience, because, like me and someone else from halfway across the world could have a shared experience, even though the way that, we live, culture, what we look like, religion, all these different pieces can be very different, but there are still ways to find common experience. And, as we were talking today, what sprung to mind for me is when you look at the word community, it sounds like common, and it also sounds like unity, right? So it's kind of like, how do we find the things that are in common with each other to create that unity? But we can only do that with the kind of curiosity that you were talking about just now, Al, and for us to open our minds and to open ourselves up to hearing the experiences of others, and not to assume that because someone is a different race, age, gender, etc., than us, that there is no shared experience present, because there almost always is, because our experiences are so rich. It's when we start to, unravel them with each other, is when we find, oh, this is what's in common, and maybe here's where the unity can come from.
But I think it also takes intentional commitments, and authentic commitment to do that. I think, and while our discussions are so positive and it highlights the benefits of community, you also brought up a valuable point, which I think is important for us to sort of bring to the forefront again. And that's, not all communities are supportive. And it can be quite presentational. It could be quite surface level. And for some, that sort of, even within organizations, it's a box that's checked, right? And when we're looking at trying to utilize the various individuals that we come in contact with to bring to our lives different experiences, to bring to our lives, opportunities to where we can really look deep within ourselves as to identifying, who do we want to be? And just because I'm part of this particular community doesn't mean necessarily that I relate to that community. And I don't have to. I think sometimes as well, that term community can actually pigeonhole, if you will, and create barriers to allow for that unity, to allow for that inclusivity, that equity, but frankly, the intentional commitment to just be human beings. We've lost, I think, over the last few years, or it's been more prevalent, we'll say. I shouldn't say the last few years, it's been ongoing, let's be honest. I think, though, more globally, we are so, many of us are living life on the do, the go, go, go type of mentality. And we forget to just be. And when we think back historically, when society was not so busy and when things were a little bit calmer, people were able to be. And Al, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. We're called human beings, and I think that sometimes we should be referred to more as human doings, because you're just right. People just don't know how to be. They never taught us things like changing a tire, balancing a checkbook, meditation, being in school. There was nothing that I shouldn't say nothing. There was too much stuff that was unnecessary for us to learn, I think, for the most part, that could have happened elsewhere, not in the school curriculum. But things like, and I know it takes place in Europe and in Asia. People meditate. The classroom meditates for, half an hour, 20 minutes every day, every morning, to set things off. And it's like treating addiction. We've done things so backwards here in the West. And I'm still kind of waiting for Canada and the US to pick up where Portugal kind of set the tone about 20, 25 years ago. Yeah. Right? Still hear good things. But yeah, absolutely. I agree. We at some point in time, we've got to stop and wonder why we're doing all of this, right? Why we're rat racing, why we're competing with the Joneses. And that just, in many cases, can just add a lot of pressure onto an individual's mindset. My dad thinks that, my mom thinks that, and my boss thinks this other thing. And sometimes we can get to a point where we don't know where to turn. So, at those moments where we can be individually collective for our own overall well-being, I think are paramount. And because, as you and I well know, and I'm sure Asante and Ken will know as well, you can't pour from an empty cup. right? Unless we're taking care of ourselves first. And that was one of my biggest challenges in recovery myself. Selfishness. This is a selfish program. And I just spent 30 years being selfish. Yeah, it's a different kind of selfishness. Once it was explained to me and I grasped the concept, I could wrap my bald head around it. It was actually easier to digest, and it afforded me an opportunity to really do some introspection and some real healing.
Thank you so much. And that, again, really highlights that community can definitely contribute and influence one's mental health in a positive way that is meaningful, relevant, sustainable, right? To know that we have that network accessible, whether it be a network of support of peers, whether it be that community of lived experience, whatever the case may be, it definitely can add and contribute to the value in which we live our lives and how we maintain that mental state. But we'd be amiss to not explore that community can also impact and have effects on mental health in a negative way. We cannot ignore that. So Kendall, I defer to you to sort of explore that particular topic with regards to the negativity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. I think some of us have already touched on it here today in regards to, for me, when community asks you to slice off pieces of yourself in order to fit in or be validated or be affirmed, that is not community to me. And yet we know people will bend, break themselves to fit into these little boxes. And, for example, I shared this with Chris the other day, Ayanna Vincent, a quote by her in terms of the family tree. And so she's saying that sometimes the family tree will be the one to put the noose around your neck. And so, again, this is just highlighting that's community in a smaller sense. But similarly, when we take it outside of the home, people do the same things for attachment. So that is when community is not community. Yeah. When you're depleting yourself.
Yeah, I think it goes, when we talk about sort of individual experiences, right? Whether it be work relationships, whether it be personal relationships, we always advocate and encourage you to sort of look at avoiding those or sort of cleaning up house with those individuals that deplete your energy, right? And circle yourself with or seek out those that replenish that energy. But we only speak to that with regards to a point A to point B type of dynamic, an individual to an individual. And we really need to explore that same, concept when it comes to community, or really be mindful of how we're talking and using that term community. I think it brings back to, we highlight when we talk about mental health, that language matters. Well, we also have to be mindful of the terms that we use and how we use them. And again, from experience, both professionally and personally, that term community is so loosely used that the true intention and benefit of it is actually lost. It has become presentational. It has become this automatic sort of word that's thrown out there, and we just all fit in the mold. I think with all of these conversations that we're having, it's really looking at taking that moment of pause, reflect on what it is we need, what it is we want, and who around us do we want to bring into that? Who around us do we need to be of support to us to achieve that? And who do we need to sort of let go of that doesn't allow us to achieve it? We need to give ourselves permission to reflect on that in order to actually act. So it does bring us back again, that sense of community and how we individually defined that sense of community. But today's conversation, as all our real talks, is about linking it to mental health. Without a solid foundation, not all of us thrive. And sometimes we need others to help contribute to that foundation in which we stand ourselves on a daily basis. But ultimately, it's looking at what is it that we need to put into action. What is it that we are committed to, not only for ourselves, but for others, to help foster a positive mental health experience. That's really what we need. So, Al, we know that Indigenous practices really highlight that relationship of community. And, for the purpose of, those that are listening either now or after, what does mental health as it pertains within the community of the Indigenous peoples mean? And how does the community, the collective, fit into that?
Really good question. To me, mental health is all about balance. I mean, life to me is all about balance. I made mention in the land acknowledgement that Mother Earth gives us everything that we need. She provides everything. For every ailment, there's a plant, there's a medicine. And in taking what we need from Mother Earth, whether it be the resources of the flora or fauna, we've got to practice certain attitudes about what we take and why we take them, and is it going to benefit us down the road? And along those lines, it brings me back to our 4 rooms. And I'll always go to that in the sense of balance. It's easy for us to know when a tire on our car is out of balance. We've got that vibration, it might turn into a wobble, and you've got other parts of it. But not always is that clear to us in our personal lives. And most people, as we are known to be human doings, either don't or can't or won't, or maybe even don't even think about making the time to visit those 4 rooms every day. And we've got to have that balance in my mind, because it does foster a healthy relationship with ourselves and with the reasons why we do what we do. If it's 10 minutes of standing outside and listening to the birds for your spiritual needs. You don't have to generally meditate. You don't have to, go out and try to save the world. We just got to do small things with great love and with great intent, and be of service to one another. And I believe it was Asante said earlier. I mean, we're just here. We should be helping one another. We are a community, hence the term of helping one another. And I mean, at the end of the day, after all, we're just walking each other home. Why can't we all play nice in the sandbox? And that analogy I've used over the years doing what I've done about that island of misfit toys. Often, we're cast adrift in society and our familial homes. We're not the jocks, we're not the book club people, and we don't feel like we fit, as has been mentioned. But there was always a island of misfit toys for everybody, whatever that may form that might come in. But the commonality in that sense is that we all have something wrong with us, or that we perceive as wrong, unacceptable by society. And there's where we get that pigeonholed and that label, because I think we all know that psychological labels that just simply don't peel off. And I think that for the most part, if we can do what we can do for ourselves, again, it's like dropping the pebble in the pond and everything reverberates out from the center. And under the banner of that, you can't pour from an empty cup. So we take care of ourselves. In other words, if we can keep our own house in order, then we can take care of the things in that house. Because until that happens, we can't. We can't expect ourselves to do that, because when we do, we often fall short. We blame ourselves, and we further isolate and further, self-sabotage, and there goes our self-esteem, there goes our self-confidence, value, worth, all that stuff. But unless somebody throws a monkey wrench into the spokes and stops the little cycle and gets somebody's attention, we often don't know that that's happening. And I think it's just a reminder that we should be visiting those 4 rooms: the spiritual, the mental, the physical, and the emotional rooms in our homes, to try to keep things in balance, and not on any great scale, on a small, personal, my well-being, me only type scale. And I think from that, the next person does it, the next person does it. We form a circle of care, or a chain where, we're all in support of one another, because at the end of the day, when it's the weakest link sort of syndrome, right? We're only as strong as the weakest link. And if that weakest link isn't on board, then, maybe we should think about replacing it or getting rid of it altogether. But, these are people and their mental health. And it's much more important and much more personal and effective if we can individualize it, because it allows people to feel, again, a sense of belonging, a sense of importance, and a sense of purpose.
Well, I always say we are the only constant in our lives, regardless of what group we belong or who we come in contact with, whether it be personally or professionally. We are the only constant entity that is present in each of those circumstances. So while, yes, today's conversation is about the influence or the importance of community on mental health, right? It also started with the strength of numbers. You cannot have a healthy community if its members are not healthy themselves. So right now we're sort of at a point where I'd love to invite questions from those that are with us live as we continue the conversation. Please feel free to use your little chat box and share any questions or feedback that you might have, whether about what we've already spoken about or even questions for existing panelists. Now, Asante, we sort of have touched upon various things throughout today. We've spoken about the importance of, that sense of community from shared experiences, that sense of needing to change and advocate for change. That, frankly, let's be honest, is also systematic for a lot of what we are trying to overcome and battle through. So, what are the challenges and factors that you identify that we should consider as we are trying to move towards a more supportive collective consciousness when it comes to mental health and just frankly supporting each other?
It's a really good question. I think when people ask questions like this, they expect the answers to be long and complicated. But I don't think that the answers are long and complicated, or that they need to be long and complicated. I think, to go to what Al was just saying, I think a lot of it really just boils down to setting an example for what goodness is by just being a good person. I do a lot of talks, especially with children lately, around, mental health, diversity, inclusion, and things like that. And you got to think, you're in front of a kid who's like 9, 10 years old. These are big ideas for them, right? And what's really interesting is actually, being around these kids, like, they understand way better than like most of the adults in my life, which is a good sign. That being said, one of the things I say to them is, don't be a bad guy in someone else's story, right? And I think the underlying message in that is just, when we are good people and we treat everybody well and we commit to that, and we commit to thinking about what everybody needs to feel safe, then the actions sprout from there, right? So it's all of these things, of course, they're complicated, and they are, but I think if we are doing a good job of being good human beings toward others, that we don't necessarily have to worry so much about if we're saying the right thing, doing the right thing, making mistakes. Because if we say the wrong thing and we do make a mistake, because we've committed to being this person who's curious, who cares, who's compassionate, etc., that we will make amends, because that's just part of who we see ourselves as, and what it's part of what we believe ourselves to be. And humans generally express themselves based on what they believe about themselves, right? So if it's simple, but it's hard to get to that place, I think, for some folks, because we just haven't been taught how to do that well, and it requires a level of self-awareness and introspection and empathy and these things that, going back to what Al was saying, these are the things that we should be teaching kids in school, right? Because I remember getting like 100% in Canadian geography in grade 6, and Nowadays, if you ask me to name the capital of Yellowknife, could I tell you? Of course I can. you know, but I do remember all those lessons from being in kindergarten when I had a teacher that was really committed to making sure that we all treated each other well. And that's kind of where it started for me. And that's helped carry me through my life. And, I think if we all just committed to that, it would make having the conversations that we need to have and doing the things that we need to do a lot easier.
I think that I agree completely, 100%. And I like the fact that you started by saying it's a lot simpler than what, people think. And I sort of sit there and I thought about it and I'm like, we put these expectations on people to have all these answers and to have this, blueprint of plan to build off of and how to go about things, when we know that unmet expectations is the mother of disappointment. So if we have expectations that are not only put on us by others, but that we put upon ourselves as well, and it doesn't go according to plan, well, now things, have gone to shit and forget about it. Things just forget it. There's no point in continuously try. But if we actually bring it back to that simple fact, any small thing can make a big difference. And it's those small moments, those small changes of commitment, whether it be us, trying to learn something new about a different culture, or whether it be, meeting someone that we've never really met before from a different culture or a different community, and trying to learn. That simple action of commitment to just wanting to learn can really contribute to change in a more beneficial, positive way. And I think you also brought up a point about modeling, right? We don't know what we don't know, right? And what we do know is that racism is learned. What we do know is it is the adults within the sphere of influence to our young that can contribute to how that child manages their emotions, talks about their emotions, and talks about their experiences. So the modeling is really, for me, I think, a critical factor in supporting our young people within our communities. It starts with us. So Kendall, aside from modeling, or in addition to, if you want to expand on that, what can we do to support our young people within our various communities as it relates to mental health or other life experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's about creating the space. Yes, these spaces are being created. I think Asante was speaking to what the youth know about racism, maybe comparative to what we were taught in schools. Like, the youth know a lot. So I think we have to also give them permission, and also give them the benefit of the doubt. They are observant. We know that. So it's about making that space to have these conversations, and the modeling as well, in terms of, like, if it is a conversation where you are uncomfortable with it, that's going to be modeled to the young people in your life. So settle with whatever you need to sit in. Don't plant roots in it, but sit in it so you can make sense of it, and then provide that space for the youth in your life.
Thank you. Wonderful. And that again sort of highlights the fact that, we need to support the transition from conversation to intentional practice, right? And it is about identifying what that commitment is going to look like for each of you, right? We here as a panelists, including myself, within our various roles, various communities, various identities, have one thing in common as well, and that's our commitment. It's our commitment to extending, expanding, and aligning ourselves with values aimed at recognizing the importance of individual and collective advocacy. And that's advocacy for support, for growth, for transformation, and for community wellness. So we as a group are inviting you as a community member to engage with an energy of interest. concern, and intention around how not only you, but we as a collective conscious can respond to an issue. Respond to what's not only affecting individuals from within your own communities, but also impacting our larger communities as well. So as we wrap up today, and I thank each of my panelists for joining us, I want to leave you all with these two questions to reflect on. What steps do we want to take as a community, and what role do you want to play? And for that, thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Big Wetch.
Thank you.